So let's begin in the Millerite history, where where a lot of the things we understand about the priests, the Levites, and the Nethinims, or how we come to them, a lot of these things come from the Millerite history. So the Millerite history was all about the 2300 days. And this is from Daniel chapter 8. Sorry. So the Millerites were, this whole line was about the end of the 2300 days. There came to a lot of truths on the way to that, but the main gist of it was the 2300 days, and more specifically, the end of the 2300 days. And so, and looking at the beginning of the 2300 days and help them understand the end, and in looking at the beginning of the 2300 days also gave us an understanding of the priests, Levites, and Nethinims. So I'll just put some waymarks down here. So we are familiar with 1798, and this is the time of the end. And then we have October 22nd, 1844. Then we have the Midnight Cry, which was August 15th, 1844. We have April 19th, 1844. And just for the sake, I'll put August 11th, 1840. So I'm going to go through this study or kind of how we derived the priests, Levites, and Nethinims in the way that I understood it. And so that's why I welcome anybody else to chime in and give any understanding or other ways that they might have come to it. So there's a couple of important waymarks that we have here. So specifically, I want to focus on this period here. And with this period, I want to also mark, at least at the time, what we understood by where the angels would come. So we had the first angel's message was in 1798. The second angel's message was in April 19th, 1844. We say that the second angel's message was empowered at the Midnight Cry on August 15th. And then we had the third angel come October 22nd, 1844. So if we zoom into this history from the April 19th, 1844 to October 22nd, 1844, I'll just draw it again here so we can zoom in. Okay, so we've zoomed into April 19th, 1844, October 22nd, 1844, and August 15th, 1844. So we had a number of different characteristics attached to each of these waymarks, and we can overlay a number of things with them. So can anyone give me any characteristics that about April 19th, 1844? What happened there? Why was it an important date? What other things can we draw out of there? It's an open question for anyone to answer. Can anyone hear me? Please, do Debbie, can you hear me? I've been muted the whole time, or can you still hear me?
I can still hear you.
Okay. So what happened on April 19th, 1844?
I think we would attach a tarrying time to April 19, and why we do so is because, if I'm not mistaken, April 18th was the end of the Jewish year when they were first expecting Christ to come. And so when Christ didn't come on April 18th, on the 19th, they were disappointed, in inverted commas, not the great disappointment, but and they started, I'll just say disappointed. And so they started tarrying, waiting for the bridegroom, so to speak.
Okay. So yeah, so if we look at the 43 chart that was made in actually in 1842, it has the waymark of 1843 on it. So the Millerites believed that Christ was going to come in 1843. Now, they reckoned from the Jewish year. So if we have our calendar goes from January to December. So we say that's the beginning and that's the end. Whereas the Millerites realized that the calendar of the Jews actually goes a slightly offset, and it goes at least from at that time from let's say from April to April, for sake of simplicity. There's more details to dive into these calendars, but that's slightly separate. So in the year 1843 of this calendar that we use, so this is called the Gregorian calendar. The year 1843 ended in December 31st, effectively, 1843. And then the next year began here on January 1st. Okay, but the Jewish year, so let me call this the Jewish year, 1843, so it's still the same, 1843, actually ended on April 18th, 1844. So this here is, it can cause a bit of confusion. A lot of us are familiar with it, but some of us are not. So this is the 1843 is on this side and 1844 is on this side. But these are the Gregorian calendars. Okay. But when we look at the Jewish year goes from April 1843 to April 1844. And so this extra bit here, this beginning of the Gregorian calendar, January to April 1844, was actually still the year 1843 according to Jewish reckoning. And so the Millerites believed that Christ was going to come anytime between this April and that April. At least they said the last day that he could come was April 18th, 1843, because that's when the 2300 days would end. And so April 18th came and it passed and Christ didn't come according to the reckoning. And so here's the first day of April 19th. And this is where the Jewish year 1844 begins. But now this is after so they've predicted this period that Christ is going to come, and they come to the end and he doesn't come. And so they're in this time, as Curtis mentioned, this tarrying time. They're in this tarrying time because they've kind of like, they've predicted Christ is coming and he didn't come on April 18th, 1844. That was the last day he could have come, which was the Jewish year 1843. Yeah, so they predicted come in 1843. He didn't come, and so they're now disappointed. They're disappointed that he didn't come. So that's why Curtis referred to this as the disappointment on April 19th, 1844. Okay, and so they in this time they're tarrying. They don't know much about what's going on, and eventually, especially around August 15th, 1944, you have Samuel Snow comes in and talks about it talks about some things in regards to what they'd missed. And what had they missed? They'd missed the fact that they didn't take into account whole years from when the decree went forth. What do I mean by that? They got a specific key from Ezra. So the 2300 days. If anyone has any questions or any comments, please feel free to open your microphone and say so. So the 2300 days had a beginning. It began somewhere and it ended somewhere, and they worked out that the 2300 days began in 457 BC, and this was taken from Daniel chapter 9, the Decree of Ezra, or the Decree of Artaxerxes that Ezra had. And so here's where a decree happens with Ezra, and this is where it ends. So what Samuel Snow effectively did, he said, okay, we've come to this point here, and we've come to a place where we're confused. We don't know exactly what's going on. We have a lot of the dates and things like that are tight, but Christ hasn't come. So what can help us understand what happens here is going back and looking at the beginning of the Decree of Ezra. So he went back and had a look at Ezra. Let me say they as a group, not to single out individuals. So they went back and they looked at the book of Ezra again to get some of the information that they were missing, and they went to this this book and chapter, and they went to Ezra chapter 7, and specifically verse 9, which gave them a bit of an indication of what was going on. So if you could turn to Ezra chapter 7, verse 9. And Curtis, if you could read Ezra 7:9 for us.
Sure. 2 seconds. So Ezra 7 verse 9 says, "For upon the first day of the first month began he to go up from Babylon, and on the first day of the 5th month came he to Jerusalem, according to the good hand of his God upon him."
Okay, so the context of Ezra chapter 7 is there's been 3 decrees given to release the Jews. So the first one was by Cyrus. The second was by Darius, and the last one was by Artaxerxes. Okay, and so the 2300 days talks about from the decree, from the time the decree goes forth, or in short, yeah, it's from the time the decree to release the Jews to go back to Jerusalem is when the 2300 days will begin. And so Cyrus kind of did version 1 of the decree, Darius did version 2, and Artaxerxes did a third and kind of final version, which allowed them to fully go back and rebuild Jerusalem. And this was in 457 BC. And this is where we are. And interestingly, as it says, in the year 457 BC, so if we take 457 as a year, so this is 457 beginning, and it's 457 end. This is BC. This is BC. Here it says that Ezra, he left with this decree. So he's got the decree of Artaxerxes. This is going to start the 2300 days. But he actually gets the decree on what's called the first day of the first month. Okay. It says, for upon the first day of the first month began he to go up from Babylon, and on the first day of the fifth month he came to Jerusalem. So they're starting to see there's something about these dates, the first day of the first month and the first day of the fifth month, because he's been given this decree, but a decree needs enforcing. So at least in this time here, from the time he's gotten it, it's kind of just in his hand. It's not really being enforced. So the decree hasn't really gone forth. It's been passed, but it's not been acted yet. Okay, so they start realizing that, okay, we need to take into account this time period at least where the decree has been released, but it's not taken effect yet. And in addition to this, they looked at the feasts, the feast days. So if we can turn to Leviticus, 20:23, okay? So they started realizing these things about these specific days, first day of the first month and first day of the fifth month. I'm going to tie this into, it sounds like I'm going to something very unrelated, but we'll tie this in again. If we go to Leviticus chapter 23, and we start in verse 4. Leviticus 23 verse 4 says, "These are the feasts of the Lord, even holy convocations, which ye shall proclaim in their seasons." Okay, so there's feast days which have certain characteristics, certain attributes, and they're supposed to be performed on specific dates every year. So they're not supposed to change. They're supposed to be at the same time every year. And so if we have a look at some of these dates, we'll see these feasts correlated with things that happened in Christ's time. And then this helped them understand what they needed to look at in their time. So in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 4, it says, "These are the feasts of the Lord, even holy convocations, in which ye shall proclaim in their seasons. On the 14th day of the first month at even is the Lord's Passover." So they looked at Passover. And so this is the 14th day of the first month. So that's the kind of terminology of using, the day and month, 14th day, first month. And on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto the Lord. Okay, so on the 15th day is the feast of unleavened bread. And that's the 15th day of the first month. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. In the first day you shall have a holy convocation, you shall do no servile work therein. But ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord 7 days. In the seventh day is a holy convocation, ye shall do no servile work therein. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, "Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, when ye be come into the land which I give unto you, and ye shall reap the harvest thereof, then ye shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest. And he shall wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted for you. On the morrow after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. And you shall offer that day, you shall wave the sheaf a he lamb without blemish of the first year for a burnt offering unto the Lord. And the meat offering thereof shall be 2 deals of fine flour mingled with oil, an offering made by fire unto the Lord for a sweet savor, and drink. And the drink offering thereof shall be of wine, the 4th part of an hin. And you shall eat neither bread nor parched corn nor green ears until the seventh day you have brought an offering unto your God. It shall be a statute forever throughout your dwellings, throughout your generations in all your dwellings." Okay, so this was the feast of first fruits. So it talks about bringing the first fruits. And this is the day after the feast of the unleavened bread. And this is the 16th day of the first month. And so on and so forth. And there's several feasts that they had. They had the Feast of Weeks, which was, I think it was 50 days, was it 49 days? after one of these feasts. Okay, so they had specific days for each feast, and the last one, or one of the last ones that was important, especially to the Millerites, was the Day of Atonement. And if you go down to verse 26 of Leviticus 23, it says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Also on the 10th day of this 7th month, there shall be a day of atonement. It shall be a holy convocation unto you, and ye shall afflict your souls and offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. And ye shall do no work in that same day, for it is a day of atonement to make an atonement for you before the Lord your God. For whatever soul it shall be shall not be afflicted in that same day. He shall be cut off from among his people. And whatever soul it be that doeth any work in that same day, the same soul will I destroy from among his people," and so on and so forth. So it says in verse 27 that this was the 10th day of the 7th month. So this was the Day of Atonement. And this was the 10th day of the 7th month. Okay, does anyone have any questions so far? So we're still looking at the priest, Levites, and Nethinims. We're just kind of deriving the logic that got us to that place and trying to fill some of the gaps for maybe some people who want in some of those studies. Okay, so they have these specific dates that they had feasts on. And one thing the Millerites realized is that some of the spring feasts, these corresponded to work that Christ did. So Passover was the crucifixion. Crucifixion. I think that's the right spelling. Yeah, the crucifixion of Christ, and this happened on the exact date that it was supposed to be done, and this happened on the 14th day of the first month, in AD 31. So Christ was crucified on the exact day of the Passover. Then he laid in the tomb on the 15th day of the first month, which is the Sabbath. So, crucified on a Friday. On Sabbath, he was in the tomb, kind of free from sin now. And this kind of fulfilled the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And the Feast of First Fruits was on the 16th day of the first month. So if I put here in blue, this is the Friday of the crucifixion. This is the Sabbath. And this is the Sunday. Can you all see the blue that I'm using there? Or is it unclear?
Tom, I'm just reading some of the comments. Somebody Daisy put, it might be worth adding the Feast of the Trumpets to the list, as it's quite key to the story of 1844.
Okay. Daisy, can you show us where the Feast of Trumpets was? In Leviticus 23, if you could find that, that'd be good for us. So just to say that, the crucifixion happened on the Friday, the unleavened bread happened on Sabbath, and then the Feast of First Fruits was on the Sunday. And in the Feast of First Fruits, what happened was, as we read, you're supposed to take your first fruits. So not the full crop, you have this is like spring. So you have the first bits of your harvest, the first fruits, as the feast is called, and you go and present them to the Lord, and the high priest will take it into the holy place, or into the temple, to present before God. And this is what Christ did when he took he took himself up to heaven, and he also resurrected some people on that day, and presented these people to God as this is the first fruit of my neighbors. And so they realized quite quickly that these specific dates, these specific feast days were fulfilled in the specific days or the specific date of the calendar. So the Passover had to happen on the first day of the 14th day of the first month, and leavened bread had to happen on the 15th day of the first month. The Feast of First Fruits had to happen on the 16th day of the first month. And so they're now also tying this into what they understand about Ezra 7:9, that the decree didn't go into effect on the first day of the first month, and neither did it happen on the first day of the fifth month. So they looked at the Day of Atonement and realized that this was almost like the Day of Atonement is what they believe the time that Christ was going to come, when he's going to finish the work, or he's going to finish in heaven and come down. So they believe this was the end of the 2300 days, because it had all the characteristics that they saw with the end of the 2300 days. So they went back to their history at this time, and they realized that April 19th, 1844 is the first day of the first month. So it's the first day of the first month because we see, as we saw down here, the last day of the year 1843 was on April 18th. And so the first day begins on April 19th, 1844. The first day of the new Jewish year of the calendar that they saw began at that time. And so they, so this is all happening around here. So they then had a look at these times, and they counted. They said, okay, if April 19th, 1844 is the first day of the first month, and we're looking for the Day of Atonement, which happens on the 10th day of the 7th month. When does the 10th day of the 7th month occur in the year in the year that they're looking at? Because that will tell them when Christ would come in that time. And so I've got some excerpts from from a really good study from some years ago, where they actually counted from the first day of the first month. So let's start here. You can see that here, April 19th. So that's at the top you have the designation of the Gregorian calendar, and at the bottom left you have the designation of the Jewish calendar they were using. So April 19th, this is the first day of the first month, this is the second day of the first month, third day of the first month, fourth day of the first month, and so on and so forth. And so they continued counting like that. So this is the first month, this is the second month, this is the third month there, and so on and so forth, until they got to, this is the fifth month, and this is the sixth month, and then they got down to the seventh month. So the seventh month of the Jewish year began in October. October 13th, 1844 was the first, October 13th, 1844 was the first day of the seventh month. Okay, so let me put here, this is the seventh month. And so from there, they counted 10 days to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that's how they got to the 10th day of the seventh month, which is the Day of Atonement. And this happened on October 22nd, 1844. And this is how they got to the date, October 22nd, 1844. And so they go back to their reckoning, and they then say, in their disappointment, here, and they're kind of tiring because they don't have all this information. The information comes around here. So when Samuel Snow comes at the Exeter Camp meeting, specifically on August 15th, 1844 is when he speaks about this topic. He says that October 22nd, 1844 is the new day they're looking for. And this is the 10th day of the seventh month. And this is the Day of Atonement. And we know that although they were disappointed, they had a great disappointment, they were entirely correct in their reckoning that this was actually the 10th day of the seventh month, and this is where the Day of Atonement started. It's just that they had the wrong understanding of what the Day of Atonement was. And so now when we were studying, looking back at that history, we realized how powerful this information from Ezra chapter 7, verse 9 was. So we had this first day of the first month. It lined up with the disappointment. And the 10th day of the 7th month lined up with the Day of Atonement. Now, if we go back to this calendar here, one thing we'll see is that, I don't know, one thing we'll see is that in August 15th, which is when Summer Snow actually preached on the 10th day of the 7th month, we have actually, if you can see here in the bottom, the first day, and if you count, this is the 5th month, because this is the 4th month here. This is the 4th month. The 4th month, and this is the 5th month. So the first day of the 5th month actually was the day that Summer Snow ended up preaching. And it was very providential that this was actually included in Ezra 7, Ezra chapter 7, verse 9, which is where they got this idea of the different days. So first day of the first month, first day of the fifth month, and 10th day of the 7th month. And so they saw that they didn't see it. We saw it. So I'm not sure. I don't think the Millerites had much visibility of this Ezra 7:9 and looking at specific dates like that as we did. But we looked back and we saw how powerful it is that the midnight cry. This is the midnight cry actually happened on the first day of the 5th month. So does anyone have any questions so far? Is it clear? Anyone want anything clarified? I can't see the chat, unfortunately, so you'd have to you'd have to speak up and let me know.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, I can tell you what's in there, Tom, if you want to bear with me.
Okay.
Right. You've read what Daisy said. And then she put oh gosh, come on, down here. Leviticus 23 to 25, Feast of Trumpets, which is the first day of the 7th month, 7 days before the Day of Atonement.
Okay, yeah. So we have the first day of the 7th month. And this is the trumpets.
Yeah.
And I think this might have had something to do with William Miller. And yeah, so it's really, there's a lot more in terms of the dates and the days to go into this. I think I just wanted to focus on specifically these 3 waymarks.
Curtis said, Curtis said, I think it's interesting that when examining their expectations, they were confident in the structures in place, but that what they assessed was their interpretation of the symbols and not the validity.
Mm.
Yeah.
What I meant by that is that on October 22, when they came to that date and were disappointed, they didn't, question the structures and the symbols of Day of Atonement. They were firm in their faith that those were true. Then what they re-examined was the interpretation of it. So yeah, kind of like what we are doing now.
Yeah, that is true. Thanks for that. Okay, so some other things happened on these dates. So in April 19th, 1844, there's something else we attached on that waymark. Can anybody tell me what that is? That will help us bring it to identify it in our history.
Do we attach this? Are you asking about the second angel's message?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we mark its arrival at that point.
Okay. So exactly, we have the arrival of the second angel here. We talked about earlier.
Tom, didn't you say the third oath sorry, the third angel arrived in 1844. I thought you said that at the beginning.
I did.
Maybe you meant
yeah.
the second. Did you mean the second?
No.
Or I suppose both arrived in 1844. It just depends which date. One is in April, the other is in October.
Okay. Well, yeah, okay.
Does that make sense? Or are you still?
Yeah, the second angel. So the second angel arrived is in 1844 too. The October the 22nd.
No, it was in April 19th.
October, I mean 1844. And then the third angel arrived 22nd, 1844.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
At least how we understood it. So I'm going by how we understood things at the time and how we came to the priests and Levites, and maybe and seeing how we understood it and making any nuanced changes might help us understand a bit more of that. So this was the second angel's arrival, and this was the third angel at that time. So now we come down to our line. Or let me say the line of the 144,000. At that time we would just call it our line. Okay, and again we have the same waymarks. But they were a bit reduced. So we had 1989, the time of the end. We had 9/11, what we now call 2001. We had the Sunday law, and we had the midnight cry. So we had it this way because we talked about the third angel having this warning about the mark of the beast, and you know that when you look at the order in Revelation 14, the third angel is the one which actually has this warning against receiving the mark of the beast. And so we saw that the mark of the beast would come at the Sunday law, because that's where you have the difference between, that's what the Sunday law is, where the mark of the beast is enforced, because this Sunday law was the mark of the beast. So we would put the third angel here. David, just let you know your mic is muted.
Oh, sorry.
Listen, just don't need to say anything that you might not want to say, or might not want us to hear. So we had the first angel arriving here, and then we had the angel of Revelation 18. We had this quote in Life Sketches, I think it's 411, paragraph 5, or something like that, which talks about the angel of Revelation 18 coming down when these structures are destroyed. And so we saw that this was Revelation 18. But Revelation 18 had verses 1 to 5, I think, had the first and second angel in them. And so we saw this as the empowering of the first and the arrival of the second. And so we'd put the second angel here, and we'd also say, we'd say that they're combined and blended here at this point. So we had the second angel here and the third angel, and because we had those 2 points, the second and the third angel, we also looked back at the Millerite history, and so okay, we have the second angel here, the third angel here, and in between them comes the midnight cry. And so that's how we then also derived the midnight cry here. Okay, and so
Sorry, Tom, can you just repeat that again, please?
What part specifically? Or
the midnight cry.
Okay, yeah, so we looked at the Millerite history, and we saw there's where the second angel comes, April 19th, 1844, and we had where the third angel comes on October 22nd, 1844. So that's the second angel, that's the third angel. And then we saw in between them there was the midnight cry. So the midnight cry came in between. We could locate where the midnight cry, to expect the midnight cry, between the second and the third angel. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And so when we locate where the second angel is, so we were in this history here. We're looking back. We know that 9/11 has happened. I know we call it 2001 now. I'm just kind of doing it as we used to see it. Okay, we look back and we see, we're looking back from this point, we see 9/11. That's why we could identify 9/11 and the angel of Revelation 18. But we know at some future point, the Sunday law is coming, because we know that. We've seen that from the Great Controversy and so on and so forth, that the Sunday law is coming. So we know that somewhere between the history we've been and before the Sunday law will come the midnight cry. Does that make sense? Okay, so as we saw above here, we had the dates associated with the angels. Okay, we had the second angel was associated with the first day of the first month, and the third angel was associated with the 10th day of the seventh month. So we then saw that 9/11 is the first day of the first month. Why? This is because this is when the second angel arrives, and the second angel arrives on the first day of the first month. So this is kind of in their history, it was the literal first day of the first month. It actually was the date, but obviously in our history, it's more symbolic. It's a symbolic. We weren't counting days, but we could see attributes of those same things happening in terms of the arrival of the second angel. There's other things that went into it, like the tarrying time and so on and so forth, that we also saw in 9/11. But the main thing I want to pick up from there it's the first day of the first month at 9/11. So seeing these dates associated with the angels, we then saw that there's more things actually associated with some of the angels, and one of them was the temple cleansing. Let me just get that quote. So we've now attached the first day of the first month and the second angel to 9/11. Let me try and get a. So if we go to second selected messages, 118 and paragraph 2. And if someone is there, could you please read? If I read from paragraph 1, we'll read from paragraph 1 to paragraph 2. Second selected messages, 118, paragraph 1 to paragraph 2.
Does it start off, the prophet says?
Yes.
Yeah. The prophet says, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils. Revelation 18, 1 and 2. This is the same message that was given by the second angel. Babylon is fallen, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Revelation 14:8. What is that wine? Her false doctrines. She has given to the world a false Sabbath instead of the Sabbath of the fourth commandment, and has repeated the falsehood that Satan first told Eve in Eden, that natural immortality of the soul. Many kindred errors she has spread far and wide, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. Do you want me to read number 2?
Yeah, so before we read number 2, just paragraph 1. So there's a context to what she's going to say, and also in paragraph 2. So he's talking here about the she's quoting Revelation 18, verse 1 and 2, and likening this to the second angel's message again. So this is the context of the second angel's message here that we see arrive at 9/11. Okay, so could you continue?
When Jesus began his public ministry, he cleansed the temple from its sacrilegious profanation. Among the last acts of his ministry was a second cleansing of the temple. So in the last work for the warning of the world, two distinct calls are made to the churches. The second angel's message is, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Revelation 14:8. And in the loud cry of the third angel's message, a voice is heard from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities.
Okay, thank you. So here she's talking about, in the context of the second angel's message, she parallels it to what? She parallels it to the temple cleansing. And specifically two temple cleansings. And this was similar to the two messages. Two messages to the churches. Okay? And this is the second and third angel. Okay, can you all see that from the
Yes, yes.
Okay, so there's many other places where we look at the significance of specific dates. So there's many stories in the Bible where things happen in the first day of the first month. And like we're saying, it's so key to the Millerite history that they wouldn't have been able to unlock this without this understanding of the days, first day of the first month and the 10th day of the seventh month. And it's Ezra 7:9. And Ezra 7:9 unlocked the key for them to their disappointment and offered them the answer to which would get them to the Day of Atonement that they needed. And so we realized that this is a really important set of, Ezra 7:9 is integral to this history. And even in our history, when we start locating the same places where we have these angels, we need to analyze and assess the impact of Ezra chapter 7, verse 9 in them as well. And so where one of the places we saw an allusion to the first day of the first month, things to happen. So we just read about this temple cleansings. So keeping in mind, in context, this temple cleansings, we have the two messages, like the two temple cleansings. And so at least one of the temple cleansings starts at 9/11, just like Christ began his ministry, and then he had a second temple cleansing later. So taking into account the temple cleansings being linked to the messages and the specific dates attached to these waymarks, we then went to 2 Chronicles chapter 29. The second Chronicles chapter 9. And so in 2 Chronicles chapter 9, the context of this is that Hezekiah wants to cleanse the temple. Obviously he can't do it himself because he's not qualified to cleanse the temple. But he wants to cleanse the temple because it's been closed for such a long time. His forefathers had closed the temple, and it's just kind of not out of use. So they need to clean it and clear it up before they can now use it for the use that is needed. But he needs a special group of people. Actually, before we get there, we'll go back to 2 Chronicles 29. If we turn to Ezra chapter 8, so we're talking about when Ezra left with this decree in 457, where you had the first day of the first month and the first day of the fifth month. So let's turn to Ezra chapter 8. I just realized there's something quite important I didn't tie in that we should tie in here. Is now that we understand where the first day of the first month is, the fact that the left They left Babylon on the first day of the first month and got to Jerusalem on the first day of the fifth month. And then the decree went into effect on the 10th day of the seventh month. If we turn to Ezra chapter 8, we'll see that this a group of people who were implicated in this time period as well. And if we read Ezra chapter 8, verse 15, so this is kind of like a repeat and enlarge. So in Ezra chapter 7, it talks about the decree that's been given and how he went from Babylon to Jerusalem. But then in Ezra chapter 8 kind of gives you a bit more detail of he came out, he had to wait for some people, and they had to go and do this traveling, and so on and so forth. So if you turn to Ezra chapter 8, verse 15, and read from verse 15 to verse 20, it says, "And I gathered them together to the river that runneth to Ahava, and there abode we in tents 3 days. And I viewed the people and the priests and found there of the sons, none of the sons of Levi." Okay, so this is the first day of the first month where he's come out. And remember, we talked about this tiring time in the time of the Millerites. There's many things we can say about the tiring time, including Habakkuk, which Ellen White says this tiring time was supposed to be there. But we have this situation in verse 15 where on the first day of the first month, Ezra has left for Jerusalem, where he's gathering people to go to Jerusalem. But then he abides there in tents 3 days, so he's waiting. So Ezra waits here. He waits 3 days, and he finds there, there's two specific people he doesn't find, which he needs to go with him. And he says there, at the end of verse 15, it says, "And I viewed the people and the priests and found there none of the sons of Levi." So there's no priests. There's no priests or Levites. Okay. And now this is starting to implicate the priests and the Levites in this time, in this specific history here, because even Ezra, where you get these specific dates from, which help the Millerites unlock this history, talks about the priests and the Levites, and you're not seeing any of them.
Tom, it says, I think it does say that, sorry, hello. I think it does say, and the priests. I think there were priests. I viewed the people and the priests and found there none of the sons.
Right. Okay, so there's priests, but there's no Levites.
Yeah, so there's a distinction. Yeah.
There's priests, but there's no Levites. Yeah, thanks for that distinction. That makes quite important. So there's priests here, but there's no Levites. But the important thing here is that the son is talk about the priests and the Levites. Verse 16, "Then I sent for Eleazar, for Ariel, for Shemaiah, and for Elnathan, and for Jarib, and for Elnathan, and for Nathan, and for Zechariah, and for Meshullam, chief men, also for Joyarib, and for Elnathan, men of understanding. And I sent them with commandment unto Iddo, the chief, at the place Cassiphia, and I told them what they should say unto Iddo, and to his brethren, the Nethinims, at the place Cassiphia." So the Nethinims here, we have them being mentioned as well, and that they should bring unto us ministers for the house of our God. So again, Nethinims are also mentioned. So there's no Nethinims. And the Nethinims were helpers for who helped in the temple. So the priests could go into the building. If I draw very quickly. Okay, so we had the priests could minister in the holy place. And this is the most holy place. And this is the courtyard. And this is the temple. So we're talking about the temple. So the priests could go into the holy place. If I make Okay, so we had the most holy place, the courtyard, and the holy place. And the priest could go in here. Here's only the high priest who could go into this place. The high priest could go into there. And here were the Levites, but they were assisted by the Nethinims. I'm not entirely clear if the Nethinims could go into the courtyard. I think they could, but this is where they did their work. The Levites and the Nethinims could do their work here. The priest could go into the holy place, and the high priest only could go into the most holy place. So it's interesting here that in Ezra chapter 7, verse 9, it talks about the first day of the first month, first day of the fifth month, and so on and so forth. And at the same time, when it's expanding on it, it's talking about needing ministers for the house of God. As I said in verse 17, ministers for the house of God. And this is tied to Ezra 7:9, which is like the first day of the first month, etc. So specific days of the year. Okay. So when we look at this history, talk about the priests, Levites, and the Nethinims, it's talking about it's kind of giving the context that from the first day of the first month and onward from there is when these priests, Levites, and Nethinims are being considered at the very least. And it's quite interesting that these are people to do with the cleansing of the temple. And then White likens these messages that are sent that we looked at earlier, that quote we looked at in second selected messages, that the temple cleansings are linked to the two messages. So it's almost like the priests, Levites, and Nethinims are people who cleanse the temple, who work on the temple, but they're kind of represented by messages in NY in second selected messages 118, paragraph 1 to 2. So I hope you can see the connections. I think we're jumping from one place to another, maybe jumping back and forth, but I hope it's making sense. And I hope, I hope it's making sense, and you can see that. So in Ezra chapter 8 onwards, it talks about, kind of, they've got the priests, they have to wait for the Levites and Nethinims. And so you have these three groups of people who are being considered to help with the cleaning and the services of the temple. Does anyone have any questions? If you do, I can't. If you've written anything in the chat, I can't read it. So please unmute your mic and let me know.
Tom, are you going to obviously you said that you were looking at Elder Paminda's study about the threefold union. So how are you going to tie this in now to what he was teaching? Are we getting to that, or?
Yeah, we get into that, and I think it was less to focus on the threefold union of the world, and I think in his study, the purpose of talking about the threefold union was to talk about the priests, Levites, and the Nethinims.
Right. Okay. So you get into that.
Yeah. So he was, if I could use the word, reverse engineering the context of the priests, Levites, and Nethinims with the threefold union of dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. These three groups of God's people and three groups of Satan's people. So I just thought I'd do a refresher because I think there might have been a number of people who missed some of these studies, and also nice for us to also do a refresher on how we got there, and also if anyone has any other different ideas on how to explain the priest, Levites, and Nethinims, that would also be quite welcome, because I think having these different views can help us understand it better. Okay, so we're in 2 Chronicles chapter 29 now. If we just jump back to that. 2 Chronicles 29.
So Tom.
Yeah.
In your diagram below of the temple, if you could scroll down to that, the Levites that did their work in the courtyard and the Nethinims that helped out, do Do you know if the priests, I know you said the high priest goes into the most holy place, the priest does their work in the holy place, but did the priest do any work whatsoever in the courtyard?
As far as I'm aware, I think they did. I think they would make the sacrifices
Mm-hmm.
in the courtyard. So when you took your, you had a lamb and you wanted to go for an atonement or whatever, the priest would kind of do some work in the courtyard and then take the blood and go sprinkle it in the holy place on the curtain and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So the
And
priest,
then
sorry?
Carry on, sorry.
Yeah, and even there's, the different altars, there's an altar of incense, and they needed coals which were lit from outside, and the brazen altar, and so on and so forth. And so I think there was work for the priest even outside in the courtyard, and maybe that's something that could help us help unlock maybe some of our difficulties.
Yeah.
I had a question on, I don't know if Curtis has finished, have you?
You can carry on. Emma.
Because I think this always from the beginning was confusing to me anyway. I don't know about anybody else, that the sons of Levi, I mean, all the priests were sons of Levi, because the tribe of Aaron from which the priests were taken was, Aaron's lineage he was a Levite. So everybody that served in the sanctuary was a Levite, but this passage seems to make distinction between the priests and the sons of Levi. And we've said priests and Levites, but then when he goes and calls these people, you get 40 priests and 220 Nethinims. So it doesn't say 40 sons of Levi, it says 40 priests, and it seems to be a crossover between priests and Levites. And I think when you read the passage in Spirit of Prophecy, it seems to be, I always got confused about who was what, I think, about priests and Levites and the distinction we're making. And I suppose that's linking into Kirsty's question about what did the priests do and what did the Levites do? And what did he mean in that passage? So I'm assuming when we read that, when it says, he looked at the people and the priests and saw there were no sons of Levi, do people understand that to be that he's seeing there's a lack of sons of Levi, or these priests, they are sons of Levi, but he's making a distinction that we need more priests or we need more Levites? Is he actually making that distinction? Because I'm looking back at it thinking, what distinction? Was he saying more workers for the sanctuary?
I think all priests were Levites, but not all Levites were priests.
Yes, and that's how I understood it.
Yeah, and I think we in application we see that today, in that at least spiritually we're all Adventists, but not all Adventists, are in this movement, are priests.
So when he looks around and doesn't see enough sons of Levi, is he seeing there's not enough priests as such? It's not so much sons of Levi, he's specifically looking for priests. Is that how we didn't internalize it? Because I think when we did this, we were saying he just didn't have enough Levites. So he went and he got Levites and Nethinims, and he had priests already. But obviously when we read that next bit and it says they came back with 40 priests and 220 Nethinims, it's like, what was he actually missing? Was he missing the priests? Was he missing just Levites generally? And I think that's, I don't know whether, I assumed he was missing, I think Levites, just people to do the work generally, but he calls them priests when he comes back. And I think we labeled that Levites. I think we said he comes back with Levites and Nethinims. Does that make sense? I don't know if that's understand.
No, you did make sense, and it's a good question.
Yes, it is a good question, Emma.
And then when I went and at the time this was being done, I went to the Spirit of Prophecy passage, and I remember getting confused between priests and Levites and thinking, what are we actually saying here with priests and Levites? Because she says he looks around and sees no sons of Levi. It seemed to be the other way around when I read Spirit of Prophecy, but that he was looking for priests, not Levites. And I thought, okay, so, but when the way you just said it about the Levites are the Adventists and the Nethinims, the priests are the movement, he's looking, saying there's not enough people in this movement, get some more. Is that what you're saying? I know that's making application, but I just want to get the original. And then I was going to look back in the Bible and see if he made a distinction between the sons of Aaron as the priests and the sons of Levi as just Levites. Because we make that distinction, but I'm not sure.
What is the verse in Ezra that you're referring to, and the Spirit of Prophecy passage?
I think Ezra's, the verses are the ones Tom just read, 8:15 to 8:20, I think. Where does it say the 220? Where's the total? Tom just had it there, didn't he? Did you just read that was a Bible verse, or was it where it said the total? Where they got 40 priests and 220 Nethinims. Was that Spirit of Prophecy we get that from?
I think it might, is it different? There's some, it's verse 20.
Is it?
Verse 20.
Verse 20 says that is talking about the Nethinims specifically, whom David and the princes appointed for service of the Levites. So it's 220 Nethinims.
Okay, so that's does it say 40 priests?
Not in that verse. I'm looking for it now.
Maybe it doesn't say it there then. Did we add that up to get 40?
It speaks about Levites before that.
So, I mean, we didn't read the full passage. If you go down to verse 30, verse 30 says, so took the priests and the Levites the weight of the silver and the gold and the vessels to bring them to Jerusalem unto the house of our God. So at least, I'm not sure whether they're waiting specifically for Levites or priests or whatever, but at least there's a distinction here between the priests and the Levites, and also the Nethinims have been mentioned earlier. So we have at least 3 groups mentioned here. I don't know who exactly they were waiting for. Maybe that's something that we could iron out. You know.
And they did make that distinction, I think, in the service of the sanctuary. Like you were saying, the priests ministered to do the sacrificial work, and the Levites did. Maybe that will come out of the Hezekiah passage as well. The Levites did the practical work of carrying the furniture and tidying up and all those things.
Yeah. Maybe we can read 2 Chronicles 29 and see if that will give us any more understanding. So 2 Chronicles 29. If you read from verse 1 to verse 5, read from 2 Chronicles 29, verse 1 to verse 5. It says, Hezekiah began to reign when he was 25 years old, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Abijah, the daughter of Zechariah. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that David his father had done. He, in the first year of his reign, in the first month, opened the doors of the house of the Lord and repaired them. And he brought in the priests and the Levites and gathered them together into the east street and said unto them, Hear me, ye Levites, sanctify now yourselves and sanctify the house of the Lord God of your fathers, and carry forth the filthiness as this holy place. And he goes on to say that, for our fathers have trespassed and done all these things. So he's bringing the priests and the Levites, but when he addresses them, he's addressing them all as Levites. But I think there's still that distinction between the priests and the Levites. So if we jump down to verse 12, so he kind of gives a speech telling them they should do this and do that. And just to remember, we read that quote in Second Selected Messages, linking the temple cleansing of the temple to the messages. And we've linked the messages to specific periods, specifically the second angel message at 9/11, which is the first day of the first month. Okay. So we'll see that there's a lot of things kind of tying together in these places. So verse 12 says, Then the Levites arose, Mahath the son of Amasai, and Joel the son of Azariah, of the sons of the Kohathites, and of the sons of Merari, Kish the son of Abdi, and Azariah the son of Jehalelel, and of the Gershonites, Joah the son of Zimah, and Eden the son of Joah, and of the sons of Elizaphan, Shimri, and Jael, the sons of Asaph, Zechariah, and Mattaniah, the sons of Heman, Jehiel, and Shimei, and of the sons of Jeduthun, Shemaiah, and Uzzah. And they gathered their brethren and sanctified themselves, and came according to the commandment of the king, by the words of the Lord, to cleanse the house of the Lord. Okay, again, the cleansing the house of the Lord. The house of the Lord is the temple. And the priests went into the inner part of the house of the Lord. So they went into the inner part of the house of the Lord to cleanse it and brought out all the uncleanness that they found in the temple of the Lord into the court of the house of the Lord. And the Levites took it to carry it out abroad into the brook Kidron. Okay, so here's making a distinction between the priests and the Levites, saying that the priests are cleaning at least this place, if not also here. I don't know how many of them are allowed to go into the most holy place, but they're cleaning this inside of the house, and then they bring it out into the courtyard. And here the Levites will take it from the courtyard into the brook Kidron, which is yeah. So this is the Levites, and this is the priests. And so there's kind of like two sets of cleansing here. There's two sets of cleansing. Okay, so there's cleansing of the inside and then cleansing of the courtyard. And this is reminding us of the two temple cleansings that happened in that quote. Now going back to Ezra 7:9, and don't turn to Ezra 7:9, but I mean like the first day, the first month, and the specific dates. Verse 17 says, now they began on the first day of the first month to sanctify, and on the 8th day of the month came they to the porch of the Lord. So they sanctified the house of the Lord in 8 days. And in the 16th day of the first month, they made an end. So at least the way I understood this was that on the first day of the first month, they started cleansing the inside. Let me choose another one. So they started the inside on the first day of the first month. And on the 8th day, they came to the porch. Now, I'm not sure if, I can't remember exactly what we said the porch was, but I think
we
there was a
would
porch
line up the porch with Midnight Cry. I can't remember why, but that is just coming to mind.
Yeah, I think we did it from here. So I think there's two porches, but I think there was a porch outside here, and I think this is the one that he's talking about, the porch that takes you into the building, the house of the Lord. Okay, so this is a porch. I think there's two porches. I don't know if this was Solomon's porch out here, where I think in Acts, Peter and finds the people, but I think this is the porch that he's talking about. At least that's my understanding of what we said it was, the porch. Okay.
I'm just going to give you a time check. You've got about 10 minutes. I don't know if you want to carry on until 2.
Yeah. I suppose it depends on if everybody's okay with that.
Okay.
Yeah. So the way I understood it is that on the first day of the first month, they start here in the inside, and on the 8th day of the first month, they come to the porch, and then by the 16th day of the first month, they finish cleansing the house of the temple, so the house of the Lord. So this whole place, by the 16th day of the first month, the whole in and outer court is finished. Okay, because it starts here on the first day of the first month. It takes 8 days to clean the inside until they bring it to the porch, and then it takes another 8 days for the Levites to take it further out. And so we found that very providential, because it's not only talking about the temple cleansing, it's also giving specific days that these start. So that's where we came to understand that on the first day of the first month, you have the priests clean the house of the Lord. Yeah, so the priest starts doing a work. And we had, all these concepts of the work starts in that judgment begins at the house of the Lord, the cleansing begins at the house of the Lord. And so we have this place where there's a cleansing happening first. Now, if we just jump to Revelation chapter 14 quickly. Revelation chapter 14. So like I said, this is going to be our previous understanding at this part of Revelation chapter 14. I'm going to go through this like the previous understanding, at least that I had. In Revelation 14, we'll talk about the 144,000. And we would say before that the 144,000 consisted of priests and Levites, or people from the Adventist church. The 144,000 would be part of the Adventist church. Because in Revelation 7, it talks about these tribes of Israel, and then the rest of the world. And the 144K came from the Israelites,
Tom?
and this was the SDAs.
What we said originally. Tom?
Yeah.
Are you saying what we said originally was the 144,000 were priests and Levites, or are you saying that's what we say now?
No, I'm saying at least before that's how we understood it.
Okay.
I think, go on. I don't know if we did.
No, sorry.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, I'm not sure. You might be right. I can't remember whether we did say that or not, because originally we did say it was just priests. We just said it was, no, way back we said priests and Levites, perhaps. Perhaps we said both, and we were debating it because we thought John the Baptist was a symbol of those that die, and Elijah was a symbol of those that, no, it was a Moses and Elijah on Mount Transfiguration, but we also had John the Baptist and Jesus, and we just said one of them is John the Baptist is a symbol of those that die and martyred, and then there's those that live through it, and the ones that live through it are really 140. That's how we're putting them both together. Sorry, there was a bit of a debate, I think.
And Elder Tess said that Elder Minda made it quite clear in Germany about the Levites not having the same experience as the priests.
Certainly in recent times. They did this.
So I'm saying this is how we kind of came to this and fixed certain things at certain places before, and I think it's definitely worth going back and things that we've altered, kind of reworking them to what we understand now, so we could redefine them. Maybe that give us more clarity.
Yeah, because that logic of carving them out of the church, and they're both coming from the church, priests and Levites, and that whole logic of being the stone. Yeah, I think there was that.
I think we said the 144,000 from Adventists, both
yeah.
what we now call the priests and the Levites. I think we definitely had that view at some point, and when this logic was first put forth. So I'm just going through that, and part of this is to look at some of those places where we had these understandings and saying, how can we understand that better now, and maybe in those applications it can help us. Maybe some of the difficulties we're having. So Revelation 14 talks about the 144,000 in verse 1. And if you go to verse 4, it says, "These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which followed the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb." Okay, and so we had this understanding that the Adventist church was supposed to, go on and tell people about the Sunday law, and that's why we said the 144,000 were Adventists, because we also had the view of the Sunday law back then. So, or the actual Sunday law, put it that way. So we would say that the 144,000 have to go forth as kind of like a representation of what, they're the first fruits, and they are, by their testimony, the people in the world will be convinced of the truth at the Sunday law. So we'd also see from here on is where we'd go to the world, the Sunday law with the message, and this is where the loud cry would be, and so on and so forth. And so the 144,000 had to be made up by the Sunday law, because they're the first fruits, and the first fruits would kind of be lifted up before the world. I don't know how to. This is a. So yeah, the first fruits would be there, and people would see these first fruits, and then be convinced of the truth, or maybe not convinced of the truth, but at least choose a side. And so this represented the 144,000. And so because we put this on the Sunday law, we also saw that the first fruits being listed up at the Sunday law lines up with the 16th day of the first month. Why? Because we looked at the feasts before, and we saw the feast of the first fruits was on the 16th day of the first month. Okay, and this is where these people have been cleansed, as we said, like that God's temple has been cleansed, his people are ready, they're the first fruits, and they're lifted up before the world. We had this idea of ensigns and so on and so forth. And this landed with the 16th day of the first month. And the reason why I'm bringing that out is because in 2 Chronicles 29, we have this cleansing from the first day of the first month to the 16th day of the first month, and this is for God's temple, which we also applied as the church. So from the first day of the first month to the 16th day of the first month, this is the cleansing of the priests and the Levites, and there's a natural break in the middle, where we had 8 days on this side for the inside and 8 days on the outside. And so we said that this must be then the 8th day of the first month, and the priests have to be finished by here at this point, because at that time this is the only break that we saw in between 9/11 or the second angel and Sunday law. And so if the priests are on this side, then the Levites must be here. So the priests come in this history, and the Levites then come in this history because that's the cleansing the temple. Or they're being cleansed at this side. So this is how, at least I understand how we got to where we locate the priests coming in here and the Levites coming in this section, rather than them all coming at once. I don't have any other understanding of how we came to the Levites being the midnight cry, and that's why I'm saying this is the logic that I understood very strongly about the 16th day of the first month being the first fruits of the 144,000. And so the 16th day of the first month, which means that between the first day of the first month and the 16th day of the first month, there's something in between, according to this place here. And this goes back to what the comment that Curtis made about this then being the porch. This is how we came to understand that this was the porch, because on the 8th day of the first month, the priests brought the filth from the inside onto the porch, so that by that time the inside of the house was completely cleansed. And so this is the inside, and this is the outside of the courtyard. And that's how we placed the priests where they were and the Levites where they were. And so that's how I understood it. Does anybody have a way they understood it differently? Or does that make sense? Or does it not make sense?
Just makes sense.
No, that makes sense, yeah.
So that's how we understood. Now, there's a couple of say problems or things that we need to challenge or see how we can resolve. And one of them is this here that anchored the 16th day of the first month there. Is that if the 144,000 and really not being prepared by the Sunday law, what does that do do we need to kind of redefine this whole diagram of where the priests come and the Levites come, because that moves the 16th day of the first month, moves really the one that really gives a distinction between where the priests and Levites are. Because when you look at Ezra 7:9, they're all like here at the beginning, and all the other places, but the 2 Chronicles 29 is the one that gives us this break here, this porch between the priests and the Levites. But without having this kind of anchor here, what do we need to change our conclusion on a number of things in terms of do we then need to draw the same distinction between the priests and Levites? Basically, what does that do to our understanding about the priests and Levites and 2 Chronicles 29? Because I think that's a big anchor. I think that's, yeah.
I think that the 16th day and the first month and having the 144,000 there is still valid in my opinion. And why I say that is because there's the other models that we can overlay on top of that as a second witness, being the line of agriculture, for example. And if the Sunday law is that point where two groups, you can see the plant, right? After the former rain, has brought plants to a point where they're visible, we would say that the 144,000 are that group that is visible at that point. What that looks like in reality is a discussion for another time, but at least we can say that the structure still stands, you know. And then after the Sunday law, you get the latrine, which brings that plant to maturity. So I don't think it's necessary for us to attach the Levites to that symbol, but we can still see that that symbol structurally is correct and is in the right place, if that makes sense. Tom?
Yes. Sorry, I'm thinking it through. I think I'd have to think about that one. It makes sense.
So what I said was the other line that we have that gives witness to 144,000, you know, being visible at the Sunday law is the line of agriculture. And at the Sunday law after the former rain, if we think of Matthew 13, it's at the Sunday law where we mark, you know, the plants now being visible to the servants. And if on the line of the 144,000, as we understand it today, you know, we draw up that line, it's at that point where we would say the plants are now visible.
Okay, I need to just kind of draw out so I can see.
Yeah.
Maybe it'd be helpful for others. Let me just draw the line. 144,000. Okay, so you're saying that we have the plowing, early rain, latter rain, and harvest. And this is 1989. I don't know why my pen is doing that. 1989, 2001, and you put in the Sunday law here. Close probation and second Advent. So you're saying that at this point, so this is where we're focusing on.
Yeah, so if we think of the parable of Matthew 13 of the wheat and tares, we say that the plant is sown at 2001. The seeds are sown in 2001. And then the blade and then the ear is visible at Sunday law. So we would say the servants at that point see the distinction between the two plants. The tares that the enemy sowed and the wheat that was sown by the householder.
So that here's where the
you can see the wheat.
It's one of corn, but I'm saying this is the first fruits.
However you want to conceptualize it, I'm just lining that up with what you had above, as at that point you still have that visibility of that group. So on this line, you were saying that it's the first fruits visible at the 16th day of the first month, which you lined up with at the Sunday law, and you still see that same thing in the parable of Matthew 13.
So yes, I mean, I think the reason why I'm using first fruit is less about what really goes around here, but more like the 16th day of the first month, the feast of first fruits is kind of what gives us that anchor from 9/11 to the Sunday law. and that
Yeah.
allows us to have this 8th day of the first month in the middle here. So it's more important about keeping the first fruits here rather than anything else that
Yeah.
happens.
And either way, I still think it does that.
Yeah.
What was your question, Tom, to do with that now? I'm not sure I understood your question about what's altered. Why don't you want to put it there? Or not why don't you want to? What was the question about putting it there now?
So the question was, for example, when I talked about the 144,000 being here or being made up here, or whatever I mean, our old understanding, I think even Natalie picked up and said, is that what we teach? Is that what you're saying we teach? Or so it's kind of our understanding of the 144,000 has developed since then, or has changed since then to some extent. And so it's going back and seeing what does that do to this line here? What does that do to this Feast of First Fruits, which is kind of what helped pin the 16th day of the first month? Does that make sense?
I'm not sure. I think. So are you saying because we said originally that it was made up of priests and Levites, the 144,000, and that's why we said we marked the place as the first fruits being formed. And now we're saying, are you saying, does it impact it if we just say it's priests? Is that the question, really?
Yeah, if we just say it's priests.
If we just say it's priests, can we, I think Curtis's point, I suppose, is we can still say they're made up there to a degree. I know he was making a separate point, perhaps, with the fact that we can see the blade and the ear, you know, we can see the people, and that's just wheat and tares. There's no priests and Levites in the agriculture model, but there are people made up there at Sunday law. I think it was based also on the second, temple cleansings, that with the second temple cleansing, he's got the people in place. But I guess that's the same question you're asking. Can they still be, they could still just be priests and we leave it there?
Yeah, the reason why I brought up the line of agriculture is that even though we don't see, Levites, it doesn't necessitate Levites being part of that story. That's what I'm pointing out.
No, so it's a separate point.
Able to mark it there. Yeah.
And are you asking that question, Tom, because you're saying, okay, so if we say they're not there, the Levites, I know we're saying now we're not seeing Levites anyway, we're not seeing them. Are we thinking, how's that impact it? They are still there, but we're not seeing them. I guess that's what.
So I suppose it's also going back to what other Paminda was saying in terms of, almost like doing to revise some of the things that we've been looking for about the priests and the Levites, if that makes sense. So do we need to revise what we expect, when we expect, how we expect, in the terms of, I don't want to put anything in other Paminda's words, so I don't interpret what he was saying, but he mentioned how the false prophet, they don't really agree or really come together, or they're not like friends or buddies. They're not like one group of people, but they have certain principles that kind of unite them and that culture. So if we apply that same thing to the priests, the Levites, and Nethinims, do we still need to see certain things how we would or when we would? So, for example, we'd say at the midnight cry, if the first month, this is when the Levites will start coming into the movement. And I suppose that's some of the questions people have. They're like, where are the Levites? This is where the Levites start coming in. So this being the midnight cry, this is Panium. So this is last year. So that's part of people's questions are where are the Levites? And I think that's just the purpose of going back through this and seeing, are there some areas where we need to refine the model? Do we need to, some of the questions, that's what I was writing down some of the questions here, just so we could have them to kind of ponder on and see if some of these things do actually impact whether, and I suppose it's never really been afraid to change things.
Tom, I think that's why I had made the statement earlier when we were going over the Millerites, and the fact that, you know, the symbols, when they got to October 22, the symbols that they had in place, where they had them in place, when they had them in place, they didn't necessarily question any of that. They still held to the fact that that was fact. It was set in stone through their methodology. So the how, where, when, etc., they still believed all those things to be true. The only thing they re-examined or they found out was how they interpreted those things. So now when we're asking the question, you know, where are the Levites? I think it's important, you know, that we recognize that these structures that were put in place with these symbols where they are hold, and they still structurally correct, and they were used with methodology to put them in place. But when we're reassessing, it's now I think it's our interpretation of what those things mean. So when we're making application, that's what I mean. So now when we're making application, how are we making that application? Not necessarily removing the validity of those studies and the foundations they were built upon. But yeah.
Just to let you know, Tom, it's 2 o'clock.
Okay. Because we've run out of time. I hope that was helpful for maybe someone who've never seen those studies before, or you know, the people. It's a while since we've touched on some of these things and understandings, and I hope we can continue to look at these things and ponder on them, and yeah, and maybe some answers will come to us as we continue to think about them. Maybe even as a group, where do different things fit? What impact do certain positions have on what impact do they not have? As Curtis mentioned, that the when and the where didn't change with minorities, so they didn't change necessarily. They did change for one or two things. For example, that when Christ would come, but I understand what you mean by the disappointment came.
Yeah, I was thinking that we stretched out the time, didn't they? From April, they thought that's it, it's going to finish, but now we have to extend it.
I was specifically referring to October 22.
Yeah, by the time they got there, definitely.
I mean, so there's some things that they changed and other things where they reinterpreted. So they kind of changed the way they first thought Christ was coming, and it wasn't a major change in the grand scheme of the 2300 days, but it's still significantly. It made a significant difference to how they saw things. It gave them answers to the things that they couldn't see. You know, so some of the same questions that we may be asking. So they came to April 19th. They're kind of like, wait, we thought this was going to happen. Why is it not happening? And they just had to adjust their reckoning by a couple of months, and they had some reasons behind that. But when we came to October 22nd, once it went past that, we're not changing that, but maybe what is changed is how we interpret it. And so, yeah, I think this is quite an important topic for us to think about, and you know, I think a lot of people have questions on these things, and specifically the Levites and on what's happening, what's it going to look like, where they're going to come from, when are they going to come, are they going to come, or will they just be separate from us, or whatever it may be. And so I hope this serves kind of as a foundation to remind us how we came to that understanding, and maybe we can go back and look at some of these things again, to try and understand whether there's any light to glean in terms of like some of the questions that are coming up, you know, were they all Levites, were they all priests? What does that do? Did they all come at this point? Did they come at that point? Maybe we got the porch wrong. Maybe the porch is actually here, or whatever it may be. And that can just shift our understanding enough to give us answers to questions we don't have the answer to at this time.
Tom, would you be able to download some of that on the UK Fellowship thing, please?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can save this and put it on the.
Lovely. Can the recording stop now, please?